You know him, you love him. After all, you clicked on this video. He's everyone's favorite meme-worthy skeleton, and it would seem he has a bone to pick with the people of Tamriel. Can you beat Skyrim as Skeletor? First and foremost, if it wasn't already evident, this is a pretty memey challenge run, so don't expect any grandiose acts of gaming skill. This was just for fun. With that, let's go over the rules. Wait, I'm not really sure what the heck Skeletor does. I know he's the bad guy in He-Man, but like, what does he actually do? Okay, so he's a sorcerer who uses a staff. I dig it. And since we've been playing as a skeleton, I figured he should be able to wield Ancient Nord weapons. So, rule 1, I can only attack via a staff, my fists, or Ancient Nord weapons. I also decided that no destruction spells could be used since I was already using staves. All other forms of non-combat magic are allowed. 2. I cannot heal myself using potions or food since I'm a skeleton and my stomach turned to dust several centuries ago. Again, I don't think Skeletor technically counts as a true skeleton in the TV series, but he is in Skyrim, I guess. Close enough at least. I can heal with spells instead, which will make combat marginally harder. 3. Not really a rule, but for the most part I wore mage robes the whole challenge so my armor spells, like Oak Flesh, would be more effective once I had the necessary skills. That's really it. Shout out to my good buddy Mr. Jenkins for letting me use this idea. You're a peach. It's also set to master difficulty. Ready? Let's go. It occurred to me that I probably should have used the alternate start mod because it's really weird that I rode along with the High King of Skyrim as a skeleton. Oh well, I made my character look as much like Skeletor as I could, which is hard because skeletons look pretty damn similar to each other, and I was off. By the way, the name of the mod I used here is Playable Skeleton Races, if you're interested in trying it out. It's on both PC and Xbox. I'm not sure about PlayStation though. Once Alduin attacked, I made my way through Helgen and ultimately went with Ralof because Skeletor is a true Nord. Once inside, Ralof and I were attacked by a few Imperials, and here I decided to help out for once. I don't know why, but I love watching a skeleton attack armor-clad guards with its fists. After our victory, Ralof and I made our way through the rest of the keep with very little trouble. Outside, I made my way to the Guardian Stones and picked the Mage Stone so I could level up my Restoration and Alteration faster. I also beat the tar out of some wolves. As I didn't have a usable weapon to my name yet, I stopped by the Riverwood Trader and bought an Oakflesh spell tome and decided to go to Bleak Falls Barrow before I went to Whiterun. It would be the easiest and most efficient way to acquire some Ancient Nord weapons. Well, easiest is not the way to put it. Even the most basic of bandits are a pain to deal with, and if any of them have a two-handed weapon, it's game over, even from half health. I booked it past the majority of the bandits for now, and made my way inside the barrow. The bandits here were a bit easier to deal with, and before I knew it, I was beating the ever-loving piss out of a giant frostbite spider with my bare hands, as skeletons have a natural resistance to poison attacks. Arvel ran away, but imagine my surprise when he came back to fight me. That was a poor decision. Then I fought Draugr for the first time, which was all sorts of difficult, but I finally managed to get my first weapon, a mace that I used to dispatch the rest of the Draugr, and promptly replaced with a sword. Not gonna lie, Skeletor in Skyrim looks cool as hell. With a weapon in hand, the rest of my trip was fairly standard. You know the drill. Side note here, so I don't have to go into too much detail about it later, most of my levels went towards Restoration, Alteration, and one-handed weapons. Health and Magicka were prioritized, with stamina getting no love in this challenge. I eventually came to the Golden Claw door, opened it, and got ready for the fight of my life. I knew the Draugr Overload was going to be a challenge, and boy was I right. This involved a lot of running away to heal, then running back in to try and get a few hits off. Rinse and repeat several dozen times, and there you have it. I grabbed the Dragonstone and his enchanted war axe, then made my leave. I returned to the Riverwood Trader and returned the Golden Claw. I put the reward towards a lesser ward spell tome, sold my unneeded items for profit, and started my journey to Whiterun to speak to Jarl Balgruuf. My first order of business was to assert dominance over a giant. Then I entered the city to level up my smithing skill a bit so I could sharpen my weapons for more damage. I did this by making iron arrows, which is a bit harder than making daggers since you have to spend so much time chopping wood, but it was worth it as my smithing skill went from 15 to 25. Sadly, I couldn't sharpen my weapons yet since I didn't have any steel and all the shops were closed. Instead, I headed up to Dragon's Reach to inform the Jarl of the dragon situation. After that, we talked to Farengar Stinky Fingers. He was impressed that I already had the stone, and before I knew it, it was already time to fight a dragon. Before that though, I used his enchanting table to break down some of my magical items, then stopped back at Riverwood for more iron and some steel to sharpen my weapons. I was not feeling very confident that I could fight a dragon, but off I went anyway. Of course, I would have help, but they kind of suck. My first attempt was going really well. I got in close with the war axe, and then the dragon did this epic slow-mo move and breathed fire on me. I instinctively tried to use some potions, remembered I couldn't, and promptly died. The next few attempts were more or less the same, until I decided on using my bow to take the dragon down from afar. That was until my friend Billy Joel said I couldn't beat the dragon with just my war axe. Oh yeah? Well, I am easily swayed by a good challenge. Of course, it took more attempts than I'm willing to admit, but I eventually felled the dragon with only an axe and won the bet. Then I absorbed its soul and learned the unrelenting force shout, though something was slightly off with it.
What?
Oh well. Back to Whiterun, where I was met with a very nice surprise. When I started this challenge, I knew I wanted an Alec ear hood to complete my Skeletor look, and here they were, just waiting to be stabbed and looted. So that's what I did, and now I looked just like how I wanted to. I went to talk to Yara Balgriff about the Greybeards, who have apparently summoned me, the Great Bone Lad, and I was to make my journey up the 7,000 steps to talk to them. Before that though, I stopped in Farengar's quarters and grabbed a few interesting books. One of them pointed me towards an ancient Nord weapon of great power, the Red Eagle Sword. Since I'm only allowed to use ancient Nord weapons, I figured it would be in my best interest to have it, so I made the long journey towards its home. Along the way I ran from a Sabercat because there ain't no way. When I arrived, the place was swarming with Forsworn, like a lot of Forsworn. The majority of them were no harder to kill than normal bandits, but there were a choice few I had to find creative ways to defeat. The Briarheart at the top was much easier than I anticipated, and with that I looted Red Eagle's Fury. But there was one more thing I had to do to unlock its full potential. I grabbed the copy of Red Eagle's Right and made my way to Red Eagle's tomb. Here I had to put Red Eagle's Fury in a weapon slot to open the tomb door, and then I was met with Red Eagle himself. Oh my god. You know, I kinda thought I'd be able to do this, but there are also skeletons attacking me at the same time, and Red Eagle himself can literally one-shot me. I gave it the good old college try over and over, but eventually I conceded it was hopeless and left with my head hung in shame. But that's alright, because I already had a different quest in mind, Forbidden Legend, which would have me investigate the Galder Tale. Doing so would net me a handful of epic ancient Nord items, and once I was done with the entire questline, the whole Galder amulet to boot, granting me 30 extra health, magicka, and stamina. Of course, it wouldn't be the easiest nor the fastest task, but nonetheless, I'd made up my mind to finish it. The first stop was outside Fulganther, where I grabbed a journal, leading me inside. There were plenty of dead Draugr and a spot for the Ivory Dragon Claw, which I didn't have yet. A bit further in, and I found where the living Draugr were, and by god, there were a lot of them. Thankfully, they're just normal Draugr, so it was pretty easy. I eventually found Danis Valen, took the Ivory Claw and his notes, which informed me of the locations of the 3 Galder amulet fragments. One of them was still located inside of Fulganther, so I continued onward, murdering my Draugr cousins and solving a few puzzles when I met with the Ivory Claw door. I solved the door lock, then found myself face to face with Mikrul Galderson. He was surrounded by his many Draugr thralls, which were easily disposed of, but Mikrul himself, however, that was a little more difficult. He had the Galder Blackblade, which absorbed 5 points of health from me to give to him, making the fight all the more challenging. But with enough axe wax, anything is possible. Pro-life tips from yours truly. Mikrul was now dead, again, and I was able to get the first Galder amulet fragment, which raised my health by 30 points. I also got the Blackblade, which would become my main weapon for the rest of the run. Now it was back to Whiterun, so I could take a carriage to Winterhold for the next piece of the amulet, located in Sarthal. Turns out Sarthal was locked tighter than a miser's coin purse. Not knowing why, I looked it up, and it would seem I had to join the Mages College to get in. Not sure why I didn't immediately go back to Winterhold to join the college, but instead I decided to go to Riften instead to get the other piece first. It was quite the walk, where I met with a few treasure hunters who felt the need to attack me for some reason. They didn't last long. I eventually came across Jeremyn's Hall, which is where the fragment was located. There were some skeevers and frostbite spiders, not a problem. And I also found the Fang of Han-Necht Nemet, which is apparently something Bethesda added when the Anniversary Edition came out. I think it's the most powerful dagger I've ever seen. I couldn't use it, but it would fetch me a good bit of gold when I got out of here. Now of course, what crypt would be complete without Draugr and turning stone puzzles? The Draugr were easy. The puzzle took me a bit to figure out, but I got it eventually. Alright, there's only so much you can say about killing a bunch of Draugr in a dungeon. At the end, it was time to fight another Galderson. Meet Sigdis. His shtick was to summon 2 copies of himself, and I'd have to guess which one was the real Sigdis. Thankfully, the imposters had an eerie glow about them, while the real Sigdis did not. He also used a bow, so melee attacks were very effective. With him down, I got the next fragment of the amulet, along with the Galder Blackbow, which absorbs 15 points of magicka from a target. This would come in handy if I really needed to recharge my magicka in the middle of battle. Unable to put it off any longer, I made my way to Winterhold to join the college, where I impressed them by summoning a Flame Atronach. Once I was in, Mirabelle showed me around, and then it was time to learn knowledge. After I sat in the mystical magic pool of power, of course. Tolfdir was my tutor, along with 3 other mages, all of whom were incredibly stupid. Eventually, Tolfdir asked me what I would do. I said to learn something practical, which would move the quest along. After successfully proving myself to Tolfdir, it was time to go back to Sarthal, but not without buying the Stoneflesh spell, which was stronger than Oakflesh. Back at Sarthal, I was tasked with looking for any cool magical stuff, and the culmination of my hard work landed me with the Sarthal amulet, which makes all of my spells cost 3% less to cast. Oh boy. But as soon as I picked it up, I was trapped inside and had to figure my way out. That wasn't hard, and Tolfdir and I went deeper into the crypts. I was greeted by some strange robed people of whom I did not care much for. We ventured deeper, where there were, of course, Draugr. Who would have thought? Problem here was that the Draugr were mostly of the restless variety and are much harder to kill than a normal Draugr. But all of my hard work thus far paid off, and I fought my way to the end where I found Jirik Galderson, who could not be damaged by normal means. Apparently, Tolfdir was supposed to bust in and help me by shooting lightning magic at a giant sphere in the middle of the room, which would weaken Jirik so I could damage him. But for some reason, Tolfdir was not showing up, and I had no idea what to do. I couldn't damage Jirik, I couldn't shock the sphere myself so I could damage him, and I couldn't really turn back because I left a Draugr Scourge alive in the room right outside. It was beyond frustrating. Eventually, I heard Tolfdir outside of the room and doubled back to find him fighting the Draugr Scourge. Then he made his way into Jirik's room and proceeded to try to help me fight Jirik, but not by shocking the orb. He just started attacking him directly. Not really sure what to do next, I decided to just leave and come back at a later time. That later time being 24 in-game hours of waiting. I went back in, walked over to Jirik's room, and guess who was finally doing their damn job? After that, Jirik wasn't that hard to kill, and I made away with the last piece of the amulet, and Jirik's kick-ass lightning bolt staff to boot. That's also where I stopped doing the Mage's Guild quest. Now that I had all the fragments of the amulet, it was time to head to Markarth, which was closest to Reachwater Rock. Inside, I was presented with the Emerald Dragon Claw. I used it to open the claw door, and then there was another claw door that needed the Ivory Claw to open. High security measures around here. Now it was time for the final battle with the Galdersons. I placed the amulet fragments on their respective pedestals and got ready for a challenge. I would have to fight each of the Galdersons one at a time while also having to deal with their Draugr thralls. So far, this was the hardest part of the challenge. I'm not sure why, but the Galdersons seem to have powered up from the last time I fought them, and with the inclusion of Draugr thralls, it was an absolute mess. Luckily for me, the layout of the room allowed for easy maneuverability without the Draugr being able to hit me, so whenever I was close to death, I was able to run away and heal. That didn't stop it from taking way too long to do, though. Eventually, all of the thralls were dead, and it was just me and Mikril Galderson. It took me like 15 minutes and a mixture of close range attacks and archery to finally kill him. Then I had to kill Cygnus Galderson, much easier than Mikril, though it was harder to detect which Cygnus was the real one. And then once Cygnus was dead, it was time to fight Jirik. A good mixture of melee attacks and archery saved the day once again, and with that, I was finally done with the Galder quest, and got my reward. The Galder amulet would be my main bling for the rest of the game. Now that I could finally rest and relax, I returned to Whiterun to sell all the loot I had accumulated throughout the quest. I also let Sigurd put me on the chopping block for a little bit. I worked heavily on my smithing and brought it from 25 to 36. I was working towards the goal of sharpening my enchanted weapons, a smithing of 60, though that would take me a while. I figured I would get around to it as I was doing more of the main quest, so I made my way to the 7,000 steps and ran past literally every enemy on the way there, because I'm not fighting no frost trolls. No siree. When I met the Greybeards, they asked me to shout at them, but I didn't hear them, so I asked them, "What?" But that seemed to do the trick, I guess. They deemed it necessary to teach me the second part of the Unrelenting Force Shout, which I then used to yell at spectral forms. They also took me outside and presumably did terrible things to me. Just kidding. They taught me the Whirlwind Sprint Shout. Now prepared, it was time to find the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller, everyone's favorite quest. Not gonna lie, the majority of the main quests in Skyrim, I hate doing. It's also boring. The horn was located in Ustengrav. I bet you'll never guess what was in here. Necromancers. And what corpses were they raising with their necromancy powers? Oh, is that a Draugr? I will never escape my sins. But of course, every day, I'm getting better. So the Draugr here were pushovers. I eventually came to the first puzzle that required the use of Whirlwind Sprint, and I have always hated this puzzle. It seems like it never works the way it's supposed to, but this time I managed. Somehow. Also, I set off a bunch of deadly traps. When I approached what I thought was the horn, I was instead met with a paper note saying to rent the attic room at the Riverwood Inn. Great. Even though I'm not into meeting strange people in the attic rooms of seedy establishments, I decided to go anyway. It's not like I had much of a choice, but plot twist, I wasn't meeting a random person in the attic room because the attic room didn't exist. It was Delphine, trying to be covert. She asked me if I was the Dragonborn. I said yes. She said prove it by helping me kill a dragon. Ugh. Before that, I returned to the Greybeards, had them shout at me, and learned the last word of Unrelenting Force. Instead of going to prove my worth as the Dragonborn, I went back to Farengar's place and borrowed a book called The Ethereum Wars. This would set off a quest that I would do later. For now, I spent my time selling my loot, and then my game crashed. When it finally decided to start behaving, I set off on the Ethereum quest and made my way to Arkanthams, where I was greeted by the ghost of a woman who fell to her death like a loser. I'm not going to go into detail on this quest because it's not important. The only reason I came here was to get some dwarven metal, though I will mention the Falmer were a pain in the ass. Once I was done collecting all of the dwarven metal I could fit in my pockets, I returned to Whiterun to smelt it into ingots. I chopped some wood, then made some dwarven arrows. This brought my smithing from 36 to 46, one step closer to sharpening my enchanted weapons. Still working on getting my smithing up, I went on an iron run and did the same thing again with a different metal. Still not enough smithing yet though. So I was off on another adventure to another Dwemer ruin. Thankfully, this one had no enemies of any kind, and it had a lot of dwarven metal. More wood chopping, more arrow smithing. Now my smithing was at 61, and I could finally sharpen my enchanted weapons. They go from 20 damage to 36 damage. Very worth it. Now that my weapons did almost double the damage, I was ready to fight a dragon. I made my way to Kinsgrove, where I met with Delphine, and together we fought Salkanir, which was much easier than I anticipated. I also got this cool kill cam where you can barely see me because for some reason, it's from the backside of the dragon instead of the front. Delphine would now accept me as the Dragonborn, the lone skeleton Dragonborn. So we went back to Riverwood into her underground sex dungeon where she told me I was off to a party. I was to head to Solitude and report to Malborn, who would be able to sneak any important equipment I'd need into the embassy. The problem was, every time I entered the building Malborn was in, my game crashed. This happened a lot. After a while, I got tired of it and removed every single mod except for the one that lets me play as a skeleton, and that seemed to fix it. For now at least. When I was finally able to talk to him, I gave him my sword. That was about it. I don't know why I didn't give him my robes. And the cherry on top was, upon reaching the carriage that would take me to the party, my game crashed again. Once I was finally able to board the party bus, we got to see what Party Skeletor looks like. What a lad. At the embassy, I showed them my invitation, talked with Elenwyn, and then had Razalin create a distraction for me so I could sneak deeper into the Thalmor embassy and find clues. Of course, the Thalmor aren't pushovers, and this proved much harder than it needed to be, especially this asshole with the mace. The wizards didn't help much either. After many failed attempts, I finally succeeded and put on some Thalmor robes, which honestly look epic as hell. After that, and I don't know why, the rest of them were complete pushovers, even the named NPCs. The only problem I had with this quest is I forgot how to get the key for this trapdoor so I could escape. I thought I broke the quest when in reality I just had to read the book on Esbern, which would spawn in the guy with the keys. After that, Malborn and the random prisoner and I escaped, though I'm pretty sure Malborn and the prisoner got killed by a frost troll that I was not about to fight. Now back to Delphine, and with the news that Esbern was still alive and located somewhere in Riften, I was told to find Brynjolf, who would hopefully have some information about him. And then my game crashed. Like, a lot. I'm not sure what I did wrong with this save file, but it's broken. When I finally managed to arrive in Riften, I stopped at the court wizard's place to see if I could acquire the Ironflesh spell, which naturally is better than Stoneflesh. But for me to be able to buy the spellbook from her, I had to travel around to 3 different places in very far corners of the map to find her missing junk, like a spoon or an ingot. Not sure why she left them all over God's green earth, but I got them all anyway, because I really wanted that book. With Ironflesh in hand, I made my way to Brynjolf, who had me do the intro to the Thieves Guild questline. When I was done, he told me Esbern was somewhere in the Ratway. It had the usual bandits, guys who punch, and the occasional Thalmor. Right now, they were the least of my worries. They were very easy to kill, and I could not be happier, because so far the majority of this challenge has involved me getting all of my poo pushed back inside of me. At the end of the Ratway, I found Esbern, told him I was the Dragonborn, and that Delphine needed him to come with me. He went on a spiel about Alduin and the end of the world, and then we fought our way through some more Thalmor while we made our escape. Straight back to Delphine to deliver Esbern to her waiting hands. We discussed what we needed to do next, which involved us trying to find Alduin's wall, which was located somewhere in Skyrim Temple. So together we all made our way there, and it was filled with Forsworn. I didn't expect all of the enemies to get this easy, especially on Master, but what can you do? We solved a little puzzle, made our way deeper in, and to continue moving forward I had to cut open my hand to activate the blood seal. Don't ask me how I actually did that, because I have no idea. On that note, how does oak flesh even work on a skeleton? Inside was Alduin's wall. Esbern looked at it, did some thinkins, and informed us that there seemed to be a shout that could help defeat a dragon. So with that knowledge, it was back to the Greybeards to listen to them hound me for associating with the Blades. Of course, the Greybeards didn't know the shout, but they thought their leader Parthenax might, so they agreed to teach me the clear sky shout so I'd be able to climb the mountain and talk to him. Of course, what they didn't expect me to do was run past all of the ice wraiths on the way there because I am a wuss. When I met Parthenax, he taught me the fire breath shout and made me scream at him real good, and then he questioned me on my logic as to why I'd want to defeat Alduin. Then I asked him about the Dragonren shout, and he said the only way I'd be able to learn it would be to find an Elder Scroll. Look, we're finally doing the name of the game. I asked the Greybeards if they knew where it was, and they begrudgingly told me to check out the College of Winterhold, where Urg Groshub handed me a couple of books. One of the books he handed me was by Septimus Ligamus. He said if I really wanted to know where an Elder Scroll would be, I should find him, so that's exactly what I did. Septimus is a crazy old man living in a cave with a giant Dwemer mechanism, but he did know where the scroll was, and told me after a lot of rambling. To get it, I'd have to go through Alfland. It's home to the Dwemer, so there are the usual Dwemer enemies, including a crazy cat. The Dwarven spheres here put up more of a fight than I expected them to, but as long as I had my healing spell, I was fine. This place was pretty big, so there's not much to talk about aside from killing Dwarven spheres and spiders, until I hit the Falmer. They were tough. They like to use magic and could withstand a lot of hits with my sword. This was also one of the first times I chose to use any of my staves because most of them are pretty much garbage. As with anything, patience and healing go a long way, and I was at the lift of Blackreach in no time. I stopped to do nothing in Blackreach because I knew there were pretty strong enemies here, and I didn't feel like fighting any of them. The Tower of Mizark was the final stop in this journey, where I proceeded to play around with an ancient Dwemer contraption so I could get the Elder Scroll. And with that in my inventory, it was back to Parthenax to get the fight on with Alduin, after I read the scroll and learned the Dragonren shout, of course. I didn't really know what to expect with the Alduin fight. I figured it was not going to be easy by any means, but I didn't figure the little bastard would be able to kill me in 2 seconds flat. The problem was I had no magical resistance of any kind. In fact, as a skeleton, I'm extra weak to fire damage. I give it the good old college try, and after more than enough failures, I decided to leave in favor of making some enchanted armor. My first mistake was making armor that only protected me from fire attacks. I completely forgot that Alduin would be able to use ice attacks as well, but we'll get to that in a second. I spent some time upping my enchanting skills so I could make better enchants. I also had to take a moment to actually find something that had fire resistance so I could unlock it as a usable enchantment. After about 40 minutes of grinding and crafting, I had the max amount of achievable fire resistance in the game, 85%. I felt pretty confident that I'd be able to defeat Alduin, until he hit me with the ice breath. As soon as he did that, I knew I'd made a mistake. My hubris had blinded me, and at this point I was about as frustrated as you can imagine I'd be. Having just spent nearly an hour enchanting all my stuff, now I'd have to do that again, but this time for frost resistance. Then I remembered that resist magic was an enchantment you could have which would allow me to not only resist fire and frost, but all magic, which would be extremely handy. Thankfully, I already had the resist magic enchant, and there were other ways for me to get the effect as well. I already had one of them. There was a skill in Alteration that would allow you to resist extra percentiles of magic, up to 30. I got that to 20% because I would have otherwise had to raise my Alteration to 75 instead of 50, which would have taken way too long. One of the other ways was to complete the quest at the Temple of Mara. Doing so would give me a permanent 15% resistance to magic. Not much to say about the quest itself, it was just me running around helping a few lovers. The final way I could get some more magic resistance was to take the Lord Stone, which would give me 25% magic resistance and 50 extra armor. Put those together and I had a total of 60% magic resistance, so I enchanted 1 extra piece of magic resistance armor and 1 extra piece of frost resistance armor. Since magic resistance and elemental resistances can stack, I went in with more than 85% resistance to both frost and fire. Now let's see how Alduin fares. The so-called World Eater could literally barely do any damage to me because while I was also enchanting my armor, I also made a new ancient Nord sword that absorbs more health than the Galder Blackblade, so for all the damage he did, I could absorb it back. Well, until I ran out of charge, that was. Then I had to switch to healing, but it's fair to say that Alduin didn't stand much of a chance. Now we're going to try to cut a long story short. I needed to find where Alduin went after his bitter defeat. Parthenax suggested that I trap one of his colleagues, so I was off to Jarl Balgruuf, who refused. He wouldn't let me unless I got both the Imperials and the Stormcloaks to make peace while I dealt with the Dragon Menace. So it was off to Ulfric and Tullius to get them to agree to come to the Peace Council up on High Hrothgar. Of course, neither side was really happy with this, and Jarl Elisif was very unhappy with Ulfric for killing her husband, the former High King.
What's the matter? Lost your king?
I eventually got them to agree to the terms of the peace treaty and was off to Dragon's Reach to capture Odahviing. Fairly easy. Just Dragonrend him, he'll walk towards you, and he gets trapped. If I agreed to let him go, he'd take me to where Alduin was hiding. I said yes, and we made our way to what might possibly be the most annoying portion of the challenge yet. You see, I never remember the layout of this area because I'm barely ever here. The problem was, there was one staircase that was the right way to go, and it was kinda hidden, and I didn't find that for about 20 minutes. I also didn't want to kill any of the Draugr here due to the fact that there were a crap ton of them, and dragons too. So just imagine me sprinting around totally lost for 20 minutes, dodging literally everything, and sometimes getting into a bad quick save. When I finally got my head straight, I found the stairway and had to deal with even more Draugr while I solved a puzzle, a very annoying puzzle mind you, and once that was done, I had to run past even more Draugr, and spiders, and then solve the door claw puzzle after killing the Draugr White Lord to get the claw. This area sucks. After all of that, I learned a new word of power, whoop-de-freaking-do. As usual, I ignored the Dragon Priest outside the portal to Sovngarde. When I arrived, I walked around for a bit through the mist and came upon Soon. He wanted to test my mettle to see if I could enter the Hall of Valor. This fight's always baloney. The man can two-shot me, and I couldn't get him to fall off the freaking cliff either, so that's doubly bad. What worked was I somehow managed to get him lodged in place where I could fire my bow at him without too much problem. Once he had a half health, I gained admittance to the Hall of Valor, made my way in, and talked to the Heroes 3, and Ysgramor, who's pretty cool. With our voices united, we used the Clear Sky Shout to bring the mist down and start the final fight with Alduin, which was comically easy. You see, Alduin was too busy focusing on the other 3 idiots that he wasn't focusing on the bony idiot, so I just kept taking potshots at him until he died. What a way to end it, right? Most everything else was pretty hard up until this point. With Alduin dead, Soon returned me to the mortal world and I chatted with Paarthurnax one last time and beat Skyrim as Skeletor. This was a pretty difficult challenge, I'd say for the most part. Playing Skyrim and Master in general is always a hassle. When you're playing as a Bone Man, it's not much easier. It was really fun though, and I highly suggest getting this mod because playing as a skeleton's pretty cool. If you enjoyed today's video, like and subscribe, this helps me out bunches. Also, check out some of my other challenges. If you like this one, I'm sure you'll like them too. Thanks to my patrons, Riley Anderson and Jamie East. Y'all are the best. Thanks to 6 weirdly corporeal rats in a trench coat for helping me edit this script. And they would like to thank Google for including Skyrim's dungeons in their dictionary. And until next time, stay safe out there, and peace out.